So did you sign that first time?
No.
You didn't sign?
I was in law school at the time.
Oh, okay.
Little-
Never sign anything you haven't read through. That's,
Exactly.
Yeah, the first thing.
So we're going to start off, and I'm just going to talk about you
Okay.
at the very
Sounds good.
beginning.
All right.
When was the moment that you realized you wanted to be an attorney?
I don't think there was a moment. When I was in my senior year of college, I really didn't have a plan for what I was doing afterwards. I was thinking about maybe going to law school, maybe doing something else. But I took the LSAT, I got into a school, and I figured, I would try it. I wasn't sure, but I thought I would just try it. But as soon as I started taking classes, I knew that it was something that I loved, that I wanted to keep going with.
Really? That was a complete opposite reaction I had.
Oh, really? When did you know that you were going to be an attorney?
Well, mine happened. I was in the middle of school, and I was like, my degree is going to be liberal arts and science. You can't do anything with that. And I wanted to be a history teacher. And then I was like, you can't really make any money being a history teacher and support a family.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to do that. And so I was like, I knew I wanted a big family. So I was like, I got to pick a profession that, I can make enough money doing.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, lawyers can make money. I went and took a test, and they're like, yeah, you should be a doctor. That's where you test the highest at. And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so then I went to law school, and my first semester of law school was completely opposite for me. I hated it.
Yeah. It's a lot at first. That first semester, everything is, it's so different from undergrad, like just regular college. Yeah.
Okay, so you went there. You went to where?
Roger Williams Law School.
So Roger Williams Law School. And when you were in law school, did you work for anybody?
I had a few internships that I did. I did a pro bono. My first summer, I did a pro bono program. It was during summer of 2020, so it was in the middle of COVID. And it was some organization in New York City. I never met anybody in person. It was just something I did completely remote, just a few hours every week in the summer. And then I worked for a company that represented mortgagees my second summer of law school. I did a court internship as well with a judge in Rhode Island. That was my favorite by far.
All right. And did you help with any opinions?
I did. I did a lot of site checking for opinions. So I would read through an opinion that was already drafted and make sure that it was perfect start to finish. No grammatical errors, no typos, that the citations were all correct. So I did some of those. And I would also write briefs for the judge on a case that, we had heard that he was working on. And I would go through all of the legal issues, summarize everything, and then offer my opinion on how the case should come out. And that was a pretty cool experience to be, working with a judge and to be able to tell him, this is my opinion on this case that the Supreme Court is going to decide on, and for him to actually be able to discuss that with me and listen to what I had to say.
Did you ever go to the actual hearings after that?
Yes. I went to every single hearing while I was an intern there.
And so when you were there, did you ever listen to him make any of your arguments?
I heard him bring up my points a few times for sure during the oral arguments at the court. He definitely it was things that we had discussed beforehand, but he did a few times.
Yeah, you're really good at the making sure everything's correct because you did it for me for a while.
That was my favorite part, was just the grammar checks on everything. I actually enjoy doing that. So what was one of the cases that came up that you guys had to make that they had to make opinion on that you remember that you were kind of part of? And one of the most memorable cases was actually the first oral argument that I ever heard when I first started as an intern. And it was actually one of the people was pro se. He did not have an attorney. He was just there representing himself.
In their Supreme Court?
Yes. And
Wow.
It was a family law case. It was the person who was pro se. It was a father, and custody. The case, the mother had full custody of the child. Custody had been taken away from him. And he went up and he had to make a case for himself on why he should have custody of his son. It was really, really sad to see that, he was in that position, that he was making that case. And I didn't have much background. I didn't know if he should have custody or not. But it was just really tough to see. Regardless, it's just a tough situation all around. So I never forgot that one.
Oh, yeah, because the hardest thing that I've watched with family court is, so you're losing half your assets, and you're already usually going through a divorce because you're financially strapped. And then when there's a fight, and especially if it's being appealed and different things like that, the cost to pay an attorney to do something like that is just too much. Like, people don't understand like how difficult it is to be a family law attorney.
Yeah.
So they earn every penny that they get because it's, people get upset about how much they pay their family law attorneys, but they don't understand. It's like it's the worst job you can have. Most attorneys don't want to do it. I mean, there's some attorneys that love it, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
And that's because you're taking people at their worst position of their life, and you have to help them through that. And you have to take all that negative energy. And so those guys, they charge a lot of money.
Yeah.
Almost every family law attorney I know has divorced themselves. And I think it's probably a lot has to do with the fact that it's too hard not to bring that home. Because when I did it for 1 year, just so everybody knows out there, it was the worst year of my life. Yeah. It was very, very difficult. So, yeah, that would be very interesting to have that issue of having to be in front of a Supreme Court of your state trying to make your arguments the best you can.
Yes. Yeah. I can't even imagine that situation. And we deal with conflict, as estate planning attorneys, we deal with that. But usually it's a step removed, or it's siblings fighting after parents died, something like that. But I think it's a different level when somebody's actively going through a divorce. Probably the worst, one of the worst times in their life. Yeah.
So you do estate planning, probate law now.
Yes, I do.
And so you get to see the probate side.
Yes, I've started seeing some of that for sure.
And you're running into these situations where people are fighting and people are going through different things. But it's a little bit different because they're fighting over to get something, usually not to lose something. Yeah. And that's very different reaction people have. They might be upset that they didn't get as much as they wanted, but they're still getting something usually.
Usually, yes.
Okay, and so the next step we're going to talk about today, which is timeshares.
Yes.
Okay, and now most people might not know what a timeshare is. So what is a timeshare?
So a timeshare, it's basically a vacation plan. So it's a plan where you make an agreement with a company, either a contract or a deed, that says that you'll be able to use a vacation property, usually for a specific time during the year. Could be for a specific 2 weeks. It's the same every year. Or it could be, it could change. But it's basically a plan where this vacation property, you'll be able to use it consistently every year.
Yeah, my experience, I've had 2 run-ins with timeshares. One was, I had no idea what they were or anything. All of a sudden, we were at some drawing. And it was like, oh, you guys want a vacation. And we're like, no way. And so we went on the vacation. And then they're like, well, in order to get your vacation and get everything, get your tickets, you got to go to this meeting. Yeah. And we're like, oh, that's weird. They didn't really talk about this beforehand. So I go into the meeting with me and my wife, and it was a really hard sell situation. Because they're holding on to the tickets. We're all ready to go on the vacation, and they just keep going and saying, sign here, sign here. Mm-hmm. So, that was my experience with the first time. And the second time was at Six Flags. The guy's like, oh, do a drawing for a vacation. I'm like, got me once. I'm not going to have that happen again.
Yeah. So did you sign that first time?
No. I was in law school at the time.
Oh, okay. Never sign anything you haven't read through. That's,
exactly.
Yeah, the first thing.
That was the first thing. But more importantly, I had no money. And so I'm like, I can't pay these monthly fees that you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
But I want to go through that. Okay, so because these are pretty heavy-handed contracts.
Yes, that is. They are heavy-handed, and they have a reputation for being kind of a scammy type business. Very difficult to deal with, to get out of. A lot of people. Some people like them. Some people don't like them. Yeah. Yeah,
and so one of the issues is first off, I shouldn't just be negative about timeshares because I have I have friends and a lot of people I know that love their timeshares.
Yeah. For sure.
In fact, I just had I had a probate just recently, and one of the kids was willing to give up a significant portion of what she was going to get because she wanted these timeshares
Wow.
that their parents had gotten a long time ago. And apparently this timeshare was actually a really good one. And since it was set up and the fees were all set up years and years ago, you can't, they're low. They're really low feed. And so it's like a deed one, I think, that you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. So there are two types of timeshares. You can have a deed timeshare, which is essentially where you're buying a very small percentage of property. But once that contract goes through, you own part of the property. So let's say you have, you're going to be able to use that timeshare for 1 week out of the year. So you'll own 1/52nd of the property. But there will actually be a deed that's given over to you, and you'll have ownership in that property. Now, that could also mean that you'll have a mortgage on the property, like with any other property that you buy. So that's the first type of timeshare. And the second would be a contract timeshare. So that would be more similar to a lease, where it says you're able to use the timeshare for a certain amount of time every year, but you're just leasing it. You don't own any piece of the property itself. And then that lease is going to end at some time. They'll say, after this amount of years, that the timeshare is done at that point. And then you have no ownership whatsoever in the property.
So you have any idea which one's a better one to do?
I think it depends. If you're in a situation where it's something you want to pass down to your children, you want it forever, and you want to be able to pass that along, I think a deed timeshare might be better in that situation. But the downside of those is that they're more difficult to get rid of than the contract timeshares. A contract you could potentially get out of. If you're deeded that property, you own it for better or for worse. And then when you pass away, they could say that, your heirs or your beneficiaries, they now own this piece of that property, but that means they also might have to keep paying the mortgage, the fees, all of that. So I think it really depends on the situation, on, how long you want to keep it, how long you want, if your children want the property after you. So it just depends on those things.
Yeah. So in our line of work, we get questions all the time. What should I do with this timeshare? Because you have both situations. Some people who hate it, they can't believe that they got into this thing and they can never get out of it. Then you have people who love it. So let's go with the first part. Do kids have to take these?
So again, it depends. If it's the deed timeshare, if it's that type of timeshare, then yes, it's going to be in the timeshare owner's estate after they pass away. So that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that you have to accept that property. So you could potentially abandon it or disclaim it. If you're going through a probate process for that person who's passed away, and let's say they left everything to their daughter, and their daughter, she does not want this timeshare, she could potentially just abandon the property. She could, sign something saying, I have zero interest in this property. I don't want to inherit it.
Well, but if she does that, is she financially liable for that?
So that's a good question. I looked into that. I've seen various things about timeshare companies that they'll try to come after the beneficiary and try to tell them that they're liable for the ongoing fees. But if you disclaim a property, you've disclaimed it, as you know. I don't know if you've ever run into that situation where somebody wanted to disclaim something going through probate.
Well, I know in Texas we wouldn't force the heir to take the property. They could disclaim it. I mean, the estate could be responsible to have to pay those fees, and so the heir might feel responsible that way, where it's like all of a sudden the timeshare company might show up and go, oh, well, now we have $4,000 in fees that you own for trying to back out of this thing, and they're going to go after the estate, which is what they're supposed to inherit. But in Texas, if there was there's a lot of situations where I get the call all the time where it's like, my dad died, he didn't have anything, he had these debts in this timeshare. Do I have to take these? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
You don't have to take. We don't force you in the state of Texas, but that might not be just. I don't know what the law is in every state. I just know in Texas that's how we do it.
Yes. Yeah. So it could depend on the state you're in. And a lot of people are worried about it might affect their credit. If the beneficiary, the company comes after them, they say you owe these fees, and they worry, is this going to affect my credit? If it's in the estate, nobody's credit's getting affected by that. So really, in that case, I would say the best scenario is just let it go, disclaim it. And then if it's that deed timeshare, they might foreclose on the property. But in that case, if you don't want it, then it's no loss to just let that happen.
Yeah. And so you don't. least in Texas, you don't take this. I don't know. Is there any state? I guess, of course, you don't know every state law, but any state that you've worked in the past where the debt's passed to the kids? I don't think there is.
No, not that I'm aware of. There might be a state out there, but I haven't seen that.
I know
That
Pennsylvania.
could be a strategy.
I think it's Pennsylvania has. I forgot what they call them, but I know that there are laws where you are responsible to take care of like your parents, and so you have some responsibility in certain states to do that. Like in Texas, we don't make kids responsible to take care of their parents. So,
And that would be while the parents are still living, that they'd have to pay those
Yeah.
fees. Yeah.
so I don't believe that there's any state that does that. But this is United States, because people could be watching in other countries.
That's true.
You're in another country that could be completely different.
That's true.
But like as far as I understand, that's been kind of the goal. Because one of the interesting things, like in the Bible, it talks about how where the debt's transferred on to the next generation. And now I can't remember the exact story, but basically how that system, we got rid of it because it was a way of basically enslaving another generation to debt that they didn't incur.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's like, you didn't agree to anything. You shouldn't be responsible for it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so you have these timeshares. You want to leave it to your kids. How do you do that?
Yes. First and best thing to do is look at the contract and potentially contact the timeshare company. See if there's a way for them to name a beneficiary internally. If they have a form you can fill out, some sort of paperwork you can do to name a beneficiary. Now, before planning any of this, I would say first talk to your kids or whoever your beneficiaries are. Make sure they actually want the timeshare, because in your mind, you might love it. During your lifetime, you want to have it forever, use it. But they might not be able to afford the annual fees that you can afford during your lifetime. So I would say first, just make sure that they can, that they want that timeshare and that they can handle it if you're going to leave it to them. And then once you've decided that, I would say talk to the timeshare company, see if there's a way to add a beneficiary to the timeshare. I've had a few clients that have said they've been able to do that with their timeshare company, that they could just set it up so that it transfers to their kids or one of their kids after they pass away.
And then is it always just a beneficiary form, or are there other ways that they do it?
So it could be, if you have that deed timeshare, it could be somewhere in the contract itself to say, after you pass away, it'll go to your heirs. So it might be that form. It'll really just depend. There's so many different types of timeshares out there. So I would just say talk to the company, see what their process is.
Okay. And then what if there is no process there? How do you leave the asset then to your kids?
So if they don't have a process, unfortunately, at that point, you might have to go through probate. So, as estate planning attorneys, one of our clients' main goals is to avoid probate. So if you can name a beneficiary, then that would be great. But if not, then it's going to be in the client's estate. After they pass away, everything that hasn't been automatically transferred to avoid probate, it's left in their estate. So in that situation, ideally you have a will and you've appointed an executor to go through probate. So that executor now is in charge of following the directions in the will and transferring the timeshare to the beneficiaries of the person who's passed away.
Yeah, and that might be really hard because you're like, you got to spend $5,000 to probate an estate for something that, is a few $100 a month.
Yeah,
obligation, and so it gets really hard to go, well, your kids might want it, but then go, well, now I have to go probate an estate to get it. I'm not going to probate an estate to go get this.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's any way that you can transfer it, I would try to do that. I've seen some attorneys have said they'll draft an assignment to assign the timeshare to their trust or to a beneficiary. But I haven't been able to find much about that to know if that's actually effective. And that would be, if the timeshare company, they have no method internally for transferring it, to try to write out an assignment document of some sort to say, we intend to transfer it into our trust or to the beneficiary.
So you could get an assignment document and just kind of hope that it works.
Yes, you could try it. I have not been able to find for sure if that is a guaranteed solution, but you could attempt that for sure.
Yeah. I got the gist of how I would handle all this. So either I go beneficiary, or I have to be on some kind of contract or maybe some kind of deed that they actually have. And then the last is you maybe be able to assign it over through an assignment document to a trust.
Yes, you could potentially do that. With the trust, there might be a few more things to consider. So if you're leaving it to a trust, generally in that trust, you'll have your beneficiaries. So I think it might be a good idea to leave it to a specific beneficiary in the trust instead of just, say, equally to all of your kids.
Because, that's a good point.
Yeah, if it's a timeshare, you might want to make sure that one person can use that. And just so to make sure it goes to one person who will be able to use it. And as long as it's in the trust is going to have to keep paying for those maintenance fees, those annual fees. So just to make sure somebody's getting use out of the timeshare, it might be a good idea to leave it to one person.
Okay, so make sure that you put something in your document saying, hey, this goes to one specific person, I guess.
Yeah, that was my thought. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
Yeah, you can't, the kids could make an agreement of who would get it. But once again, it becomes more difficult because you're working with a third-party company if they're going to accept all the stuff or what fees they're going to charge to transfer things.
Yeah.
That's been one of the things that I've seen sneaking into documents in agreements is when you transfer, you make beneficiary transfer, companies are starting to charge for that.
Oh, yeah.
So I saw that in recently in a company that says that, when you die and we have to execute this beneficiary designation, we're going to charge your account $300. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, because if that starts happening, just so people understand, like, well, you want to avoid probate, so we tell people, go change your beneficiaries on your accounts. Well, if you have 12 accounts and I went and told you, go put beneficiaries on everything, and they're all going to charge you $300 to make the change. Well, all of a sudden it became more expensive now to try to avoid probate than just going through probate.
Yeah, it adds up.
Sure. That's a fear that I have would be something like that. Yeah. All right. Is there anything else that you feel that people should know about getting into a timeshare? Like, can I just get out of it?
So, yeah, I would say if you're looking to get into a timeshare, the worst thing to do would be to just go to one of those presentations, listen to the spiel, and then sign on the dotted line without looking through the terms. So if you're somebody who's already done your estate plan, you've already carefully thought through all of your assets, how all of that's going to work. So similarly, if you're getting into a timeshare, I would try to think through all of those things before you sign the contract. Because not for every timeshare, but for some of them, there has been a reputation that they're just very difficult to get out of. That the contracts, they say, they last in perpetuity. If you try to sell that timeshare, it's really, really difficult to sell. So there might not be anybody to buy it. So I would just make sure you think through all of those things, know that you'll be able to afford it, and also think through the estate planning implications. Make sure that you've planned all of that before you sign and agree to sign up for that timeshare, because you could be leaving your beneficiaries with a headache instead of something you thought was going to be a blessing.
Okay. And so you get a timeshare, you better think it through, and you're probably not going to get the best deal if you're being high pressure sell. But
yes, yeah.
And there might be good ones out there.
There might be. Yeah, I think it just depends on your situation, but just think it through before you get into that.
Yeah, my friend who loves this, he was showing me like all the stuff he gets from his, and he goes, if I was paying for these vacations, and they love where they go every single time. Yeah. So it made perfect sense for them. Yeah, absolutely. You just have to know it's the time commitment and look at those fees and know, can I afford this every year? And if so, then it might be a great choice for you. But I think timeshares have fallen out of popularity a little bit, especially with Airbnbs now. Those types of vacation properties, I think, are becoming more popular. And that offers more flexibility. So that could be a good alternative if the timeshare it does not work for you, I think. Yeah. And also it can it's a headache also when we're dealing with people that need to get on Medicaid. I've had those issues before, and I mean they just have to default on them. But or have someone buy them out. We've tried to sell them before, or have the kids buy it from them. Yeah. Have you had experience with people who've successfully sold their timeshares? I was sending people for a long time to a company that were trying to get out of them. I just found them on Google, and they were very hit or miss. But really, for them, I think the way the company works is They were just looking at it going, is there a market for this one? And if it's a good one and they see that, hey, yeah, this is actually a good market. This was, 30 years ago, they got into these contracts, have low fees, and then people want it. So, but.
Yeah. I researched, I saw some of those, the timeshare exit companies, but I saw mixed reviews on how effective they are. I've also seen timeshare charities where you can donate your timeshare. If nobody wants to buy it, that you could potentially donate it to a charity.
That's interesting.
Now, whether or not that's actually a charitable gift that somebody will be able to benefit from, having to pay all those fees, I'm not sure if that's actually very charitable at all. And I'm not sure if same as with the timeshare exit company, some of those might be reliable, some might not be.
Yeah.
But it is an option that I did see out there, so it might be worth looking into.
All righty. Okay. Andrea, thank you for educating me on timeshares because I didn't know a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. Yeah.